It's indeed a tremendous achus and a kavod to come and be asked to speak and to be mishtatek with such a wonderful chashuv organization this evening. Tremendous akarsa tov and overwhelming sense of gratitude extended, of course, to the Bloom residents for opening up their house for such a wonderful, such an incredible organization. And kudos, of course, and a miyuchadik akarsa tov to the wonderful and unparalleled Rabbi Bender Shlita. So we're still holding by the Ashpos, the Nitzotus of the Chag of Zmam Antatorseinu of Chag of Shavuos. And if one were to pose the question, so when did it all begin? When did this era, the Tkufa of Torah, who started Tkufa's Torah? So the Charab of Moskorishan, the first one that would come to our minds is Yaakov Avinu, the paradigmatic, Yaakov Yishtam Yoshev Olam, the Masmed par excellence, the one that even though Avada, all the Ovas HaKadoshim, they all learned Torah, but who's the one, the Maral writes in Tiferes Yisrael Perek Yates, that epitomizes what Hasmada Rab about Sum is all about, the one who could sit for 14 years in Shem and Eber without sleeping for a second. Doesn't he epitomize, he personifies better than any other what Hasmada HaTorah, what Limud HaTorah is all about? So shouldn't Tkufa's Torah begin with Yaakov Avinu, the Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Olim, the Yaakov Bechinas Teferes, the Teferes Torah? Yaakov should have started the era of Torah, but he doesn't. Because all those who are learning Daf Yomi know that it was only a few blood or a geld outside Zayim and Aleph. The Gemara as well, the parallel sugyan of Avodah Daf Tessim and Aleph, the world was destined to last for a duration of 6,000 years, Shis Alfei Shana. 2,000 years labeled Tkufas Tovavo, utter desolation, 2,000 years of Torah, followed ultimately by 2,000 years of Yemos Mashiach, writes the Barbanel and Yeshus Mashiach. The time now is ripe for Bias Gold Tzedek Mheira of Yameinu Amen. So when did it all begin? The Tkufah of Torah, that 2,000-year era. Who started? Who commenced that Tkufah of Torah? Shtein and Chazal and Avodah Zarah, Daf Tes and Tzadej and Tzadizayin. It began with Avram Avinu and the Posuk in the beginning of Lach L'chas and Nevshashar Osu B'chor. Rashi says V'shavidu Le'araiso. When Avram Avinu reached the age of 52 years old, that's when the era of Torah started. So what was unique about Avram Avinu? And didn't Noach also learn Torah? Rashi says, Meforish, Parshas Noach, Perek Zayin, Pasuk Beis. It's elaborated upon in the Medrash at the beginning of Vayikra and Parsha Beis and Os Yud. Noach learned Torah. We know Mesushalach learned Torah. Shem and Eber had a yeshiva. Shem and Eber, they also, people were learning in yeshiva Shem and Eber, according to many opinions in Chazal. Those are the 3 years when Yitzchak, after the Akedah, 37 to 40, went to learn in yeshiva Shem and Eber. Yaakov, 14 years in yeshiva Shem and Eber. The Kesef Mishnah writes in Nechas Avodah Zarah, Perek Avalocha Gimel, they even had Talmidim. So it was the Miyuchad, the Kekait of Torah Savra. So Moshe Feinstein Zatzal writes in his Drash Moshe and Parshas Noach, he writes about a similar idea in the Vedas, Vasifas, at the back of Drash Moshe and Drush Beis. Same idea I saw in Menachem and Tzion, Zaxis Menachem Tzion, Parshas Lech Lechon, it also appears in the Nachas Eliezer and Chelek Beis. Same idea. And that is that the Miyuchadik Kait of Avram Avinu. Yes, Mr. Shalach learned Torah, and Avada Noach learned Torah, Adam Arisha learned Torah. And they knew differences, they knew how to be mounted between Atami and Torah. Avada they were holding and learning. The Miyuchadik Kait of Avram Avinu, he was the first one to be Mamid Talmidim, to impart Torah to the ensuing generations, to perpetuate Torah. The Hemshechias of Torah was only Mu'ufsha, was only engendered Al Yadei and Avram Avinu. Even though the Kesef Mishnah writes they had Talmidim, but they didn't go all over the world. There was the Eson Zer, writes the Rambam and Avodah Zarah Aleph Gimel, who went. He was the traveling, the itinerant preacher. He's the one, the nomad, who went all over, all his life. He went being Megayras Anoshim, Sor Megayras Anoshim. He was the one who started Tkufas Torah. And Tzvi even writes into places in Hamagover that he even stands for Torah. He writes Avram Avinu, not even Yaakov. Who commenced the era of Torah, the first one to be Mamad Talmid and to perpetuate, to make sure that Torah is going to stay with us in a perennial fashion, to give us a sense of Hemshechias of Torah. Avram was Mamad Talmidim, and he went over the world, accumulating and amassing Talmud after Talmud. That was the Meyuchadik Kait of Avram Avinu. But the Chorah doesn't end there. Avram Avinu, of course, the Gemara tells us in Yuma Chav Chesem and Beis Amarav, and it's a Kasha L'Marshal, and many others deal with what's the Chiddush of Rav. We already have it in the Mishnah of Meforeshus at the end of Kedushim, Habezim and Aleph, that Avram Avinu Kiyam Eskola Torah Kula Kodim Shenisna. Avram Avinu kept the entire Torah before it was even given. He started Tkufas Torah, the first one to be Mamad Talmidim. He's the first one keeping every single mitzvah in the Torah. Maral even writes in Tiferes Yisrael that he kept the Losa Seis Lavdavk, all the others kept all the Losa Seis. He kept the Mamish Gans Torah with all the Tayyag mitzvahs. That's Avram Avinu. So he starts Kufas Torah, he starts being Megayer as Hanoshim, he starts imparting Torah to the ensuing generations, to Eliezer, Avram Zaken, V'Yoshev, Yeshiva, and he gave a sense of perpetuity, a sense of Hemshechiyas to Torah Seinu HaKadosh. But it's still deeper than that. The Chizkuni writes in Parshas Lech Lecha, when he quotes the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Tes, the Shavidu L'Raisi, quotes Rashi, Nefesh Asher Osu B'Chorin, writes the Chizkuni, not stam kan hischol Tukufas Torah, rather kan hischol Matan Torah. Matan Torah itself began with none other than Avram Avinu. He started Matan Torah. So what's this idea? Going back to Avram Avinu, not to Yaakov, not to Yitzchak. The miyuchadik kait Avram Avinu was because his Torah was a Torah's chesed. The figure who was the quintessential Baal Chesed, the one, the Maral, and Derech Chaim, and Ovis, the Gra, and many other Meforshim, the opening statement of Shimon HaTzadik, Mishiyari Knesset Gedola, Pirkei Ovis, Perkal, Mishnah Beis, Shoshet Forma, Olamed, Ala Torah, Avodah Gemilas Hasadim, Torahs Keneged Yaakov, Avodah Keneged Yitzchak, and Gemilas Hasadim Keneged Avram Avinu. So on the one hand, Avram Avinu was the paradigmatic Baal Chesed, the one who was Goma Chesed over and over. The Rakeach even says, when he sent Eliezer and Avram, what did he want? Go find a wife who epitomized not only Tznius, but Chesed, Chesed, more Chesed. That's what Rakeach writes. We have camels. Gemolim mentioned all throughout the Parsha Chayesor with Gemolim, Loshen, Gemilas, Gemilas Chasadim. Avram Avinu stood for Gemilas Chasadim, and at the same time, he commenced the Tkufa, the year of Torah. The Torah miyuchad to an Avram Avinu was not simply Torah, was not Liman Torah, was not Tamim Malami Torah. It was a Liman and Malami that was intertwined, inextricably bound up with Torah's Chesed, with being Gomo Chesed, and it had to be that way. More tells us, Valach the Bidrachav, Ma'orachim Afatarachim, Sugin Shabbos, Keflam Gimlam and Beis, and elsewhere in Shas, you have to follow modeling yourself after the Ribono Shalom. And writes of Hudar Pachad Yitzchak that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us that my world is mevusas and miyusad, is predicated on none other than Chesed, Tehillim, Kipito, Peitas, and Posik Beis, Olam Chesed Yibonah, that Avram Avinu has no choice, no alternative. He has to start the world predicated on none other than Midas HaChesed. Because if the ultimate native who wants nothing more than to be Meitim Umabrias commenced his world Kaviyachal with Chesed, it was all goodbye to all Mevusas on Chesed, and Avram Avinu starting out reintroducing monotheism to the world, and starting out the Shem Yisrael, Apidar Rabban and Amor, then he has no choice. He has to build it and infuse his Torah with Chesed. Olam Chesed Yibonah. And that's the Torah that we have. We have a Torah of Chesed. Chesed that Avram Avinu was curing people. And how did he cure people? Let's take a look at a fascinating Gemara in Bava Basra Tesayin Beis. The Gemara relates that Avram Avinu, when he would visit, he would see a chayla. He had an Evan Tova Tluya B'Tzavar Shel Avram Avinu, and he would reveal this Evan Tova to the chayla Miyan Esrabi, and miraculously, that was the panacea. He walked around with it and he cured everybody. Torah cures everybody. And in Shrav, at the beginning of the Varim, the Moshe Rabbeinu Kvapech V'Alosh and Ors Vasayim, he was healed Al Yedei the Torah. So what was this Evan Taiva? You think he had a miraculous, metaphysical stone,